to distinguish the difference between, what's the difference between spirituality, religion, and culture? These are three ways in which we sort out our existence. I started thinking about this one time. I was in the Brodskeller when I was in grad school at UCLA, and Westwood had this really nice little underground, subterranean coffee house, beer tavern called the Brodskeller, which basically means the place underneath the ground. It's a basement. And so I was there at the Brodskeller, and I was by myself trying to read a book for a seminar the next day. And this couple came in, and they sat down, and I know they were on their first date because as they sit down, the girl asked, "Are you religious?" And the guy, you pause for a minute, and he goes, He goes, "No." It's a very definite no. "But I'm very spiritual." And it seemed to impress her. No, you've got to wonder why a person would ask that question in the first place. I mean, this first date, she's probably thinking, this could be the father of my children. And so she wants to think, well, okay, religion could be an issue because one, he could be so religious that they probably, they'd have to get married before they had sex, and she's tired of that. Or there's the possibility that she is very religious herself, and she wants to, say, raise her children Catholic, and she wants to know if that's going to be an issue. Because if she wants to have a Catholic wedding at that time, she would have had to sign a statement that they would raise the children Catholic. And so that could be it. Or maybe she just had trouble with other people. Whatever, that was the great answer because they left immediately. She goes, "No, I'm very spiritual." And I've always wondered, I wish, at that point, by the way, I'm not eavesdropping, I am an anthropologist, and I am doing field work. So listening in is not, that's what anthropologists do. They get informants. These were my informants, and I wish I could have just snuck in the back seat to hear the rest of the conversation, because I've wondered. And so I've posed that question to thousands of students over the years I've been teaching. What would that person mean? And everybody knows kind of what that means. Well, it means that he's not into organized religion, but he has some sort of thing that you'd call spiritual. I go, but what is that thing they call spiritual? And I've gotten some great answers. So I'll just give you a couple of my favorite answers. One was the kid who said, well, I know exactly what he means because I don't go to church or read scriptures, but I study karate, and you got to say that. I study karate, and I have a very strong ki. That's what I said. I have a very strong ki. And you got to say it like that because if you don't have a strong ki, you're not getting it from your navel where it has to come from. And he goes, and my sensei recognizes it. And plus, I have a form of meditation that I do that helps me focus my concentration. I go, meditation, that's very interesting. Did you invent this? He goes, yeah, I basically invented it. You invented meditation. I go, well, the Buddha would be really thrilled to hear that because 2,500 years ago, he proffered a method of meditation that helped you focus, concentrate stuff. And the Buddha was a martial artist. He came from the Kshatriya caste. And so he was a proficient, he won contests, by the way. Historically, we're pretty sure that's true, that he was a very dynamic athlete, and that's how the two households, his father was a king, and he married another king's daughter because he won her in a tournament with archery and hand-to-hand combat. He won her, and so he was a great martial artist, and so the meditation and martial arts. I go, well, but I'm very interested in the fact that you discovered meditation, although it's not something that you can really claim that you invented. You realize, well, he goes, yeah, I watched old episodes of Kung Fu with my father, and the guy there, that martial artist there, he practiced some meditation kind of, and I try to adopt his stance. I go, you realize in that show that guy was he was a Shaolin priest, right? The Shaolin monastery in China invented what we call Kung Fu as a means of protecting the monks when they traveled places. They invented Kung Fu as a martial art, and I came out of their meditation thing. So you didn't really invent it, you just sort of adapted it, right? And so it's kind of that thing. There is no spirituality that is necessarily removed from some sort of historical religious roots, but there is a thing that I want to say is spiritual as apart from being just religious, if you think of religion as organized religion and as rituals and going through all kinds of rigmarole. And if that's what you think religion is, then I would call that sort of organized religion. And I would call spirituality unorganized religion, or a form of personal religion. But the thing about spirituality is a direct access, unmediated access to the transcendent plane of existence. Now that was a great discovery of prehistoric humans. You have no idea how much we owe to the discovery of prehistoric humans. They discovered spirit. They thought that all flesh was animated by spirit. If it was breathing, it had spirit. Hence the connection of the dual meaning of the word spirit as meaning both breath and wind, and also spirit. It being, some sort of intangible, invisible essence within us. One of my favorite answers was he was an older guy, and he goes, I was a roadie for the Grateful Dead for 10 years. He goes, so I've had many spiritual experiences, which I now term as mystical experiences. So, basically, what's going on there. He dropped about 1,000 tabs of acid, and during a Grateful Dead concert, and his mind was expanded. He was at one with the universe and all that. So those are mystical experiences. And in fact, a great historian of religions, Zahner, called those nature mystics. That eating mushrooms and stuff like that. And it's possible prehistoric people did discover psychotropic substances, and they used them. What's interesting to me, ayahuasca is one of the most powerful psychotropic substances on the planet, and it involves the combination of two plants that you wouldn't associate. One is a vine that grows in one part of the forest, and the other is a tree that produces a bark. You have to combine those two, otherwise it has no effect whatsoever. And if you ask them, how did you know to combine those two, they say the plants told us. And that's very interesting. The plants told us, find this bark and combine it with this and make this great brew, drink it, and you will see your ancestors. That's what the plants told them all that. And that's what happens in an ayahuasca ceremony. It is one of those transcendent things where it is an out-of-body experience. It is what they call an altered state of consciousness. Those things were all discovered in prehistory. And in prehistory, they learned techniques. Shamans learned techniques for those out-of-body experiences and entrance into the other world. And the thing that makes it what we call veridical is the fact that we can go to find shamans, they're getting fewer and fewer, but we can find shamans who can still go into the spirit world, find out information that is only known by a departed spirit, and bring that back. Or, one of the greatest things, one of the greatest confirmations of a shaman's ability to contact spirits in the other world is there will be somebody in their village lying in a coma, and they will be able to go into that altered state of consciousness by just their translate largely beating a drum, which the rhythms of the drum help to focus the mind in such a way that it creates an altered state of consciousness. And then they will go, which accounts for raves, by the way. Raves were invented by prehistoric humans. We've got evidence of that in some survivals of their instruments. The pentatonic scale and a little flute that's prehistoric goes about 20,000 years ago. They were playing flutes and pounding drums and stuff like that. Raves were invented in prehistory. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, that kind of the idea of the other world is confirmed because when a person is lying in a coma, the shaman will go and they'll come back out of their trance. They'll say, "Good news! I found his wandering soul in the other world, far beyond. But I was able to convince him to come back, and he'll get better in 2 or 3 days." Now I've mentioned this story before. Jesus has a lot of those shamanic qualities about him. because he is a conductor of souls. But that was discovered among the prehistory. Other things that prehistory are discovered: the sense of time, keeping time, finding ways to know what season, when the seasons would come. You've all seen pictures of Stonehenge, right? Stonehenge, those great monolithic things. I mean, you can't hardly reproduce those if you had forklifts. It's things that there are things that those ancients discovered were working with stones. I mean, the pyramids are probably one of the greatest examples of the engineering mastery of the ancient world that we can't reproduce. There was a Japanese company that said, "Oh, we'll build a pyramid. We'll build a pyramid twice the size." They ended up building a pyramid that was it was on a scale of about 1/25 the size of the actual pyramid, because they couldn't do it. They could not figure out how to build a pyramid. So the ancients, the prehistoric people, were extremely intelligent. We've had the same brain for at least 100,000 years. This brain, so there's obviously those Einsteins and those geniuses that help cultivate the spiritual landscape. And that discovery of the other world, that transcendent dimension, is a long-lasting thing. That does not go away. When we enter into the stages of cultural development, we enter a stage where we shift from being hunter-gatherers to farmers, to agriculturists. And it's very interesting to look at that shift. It takes place around the world around 10,000 BC. It's largely accredited to women. And that's just not a feminist, kind of spin. I mean, there's plenty of evidence. Çatalhöyük, which is one of the oldest excavations of a agrarian society, goes about 10. We've got an archaeological site that shows us one of the houses that was typical around that time of the agricultural revolution. The women are buried inside the house near the hearth, in the floor. Their graves are there. The men are buried outside with the dogs. And the reason why? Because quite likely women owned the property because they were the ones that invented farming. So while the men were off hunting with the dogs, so that it's no pejorative thing to be buried with your hunting companions. But that's their place was in the outside. But the women invented that center of the home and hearth, and they did it by collecting seeds, growing them, and also domesticating some animals. So some birds that could be domesticated, like chickens and things like that, little farm animals like sheep and goats and things like that could be domesticated. The women did that. So they really owned all the property, and so they hired the men when they weren't out hunting to help them collect the crops and stuff. It's very interesting. The power of the matriarchy was very strong at the beginnings of the agricultural revolution. One of the things that gets lost is that autonomy and the power of women once the empires start. After the agricultural revolution, empires are able to develop. You've got all this land, you've got stable, sedentary lifestyles, and then, guess what you do? You collect a bunch of guys and you say, hey, we need to tax your land. Well, what gives you the right to do that? Our army. See all these people we collected. The empires are an interesting thing. One of the things that happens, the subjugation of women under empires. Egypt was the last ancient empire to give up that matriarchal power of women. If you look at the early dynasties of Egypt, it's very interesting that the women are autonomous, social, free-floating beings. They have a lot of power in those early frescoes. After the encounter with the Assyrians, the women have to be veiled and are subjugated in Egyptian culture. It's one of the last of the great civilizations to give up the power and autonomy of women. I just want to say that all those stories that you find worldwide about a kind of a sense of a fall, like it's like the Garden of Eden story. Many stories around the world are bemoaning the loss of a paradise state. A lot of people think, a lot of scholars think, what that is remembering was the freedom that we had right at the verge of being hunter-gatherers, where we could just collect food and we hunted, and then we started to grow stuff, and everything was bountiful, everything we could want. Where the fall came in is once people started getting organized and you got huge governments and empires. That was the fall of man. That was the fall of humanity right there. The loss of the paradise state and the loss of the equality among the sexes, which was, it's kind of interesting. If you look at Genesis, you still see how powerful Eve is. She is able to carry on conversation with the most sophisticated creature, the serpent. And she's the one that has the theological discussion in the garden. It's like, I say, Adam is just her dumb sex partner in the background, because you can tell, because when she sees that this is desirable to make one wise, she takes it and her eyes are opened up, and she goes to Adam, she goes, "Here, eat this." And he goes, "Okay." Sure, whatever you say. It's a lot more complicated than that, but it's an interesting dynamic there, that what gets lost in the empires is kind of a much more egalitarian, symbiotic relationship with nature, which is the survival of paganism in the modern world. Paganism is a very local, earth-centered form of finding spirituality. You find spirituality in the nature itself, and that becomes a relationship that is in the wholeness of being, includes the unity of reality and an access to the transcendent that sometimes gets lost when you have too organized a religion. So I would just kind of conclude by saying, one of the things that's very interesting in neo-pagan movements is that they don't really want to jettison Jesus. Jesus gets reinterpreted not as so much a soteriological figure, but as a healer and as a magician who is able to connect you with those things that cure you. In an interesting passage in the New Testament where Jesus heals a blind man, instead of just saying, "Okay, you're healed," and saying that happens, he takes some dust, some mud, he spits in it, and he mixes it, and he puts it on him and tells him, "Rinse your eyes, and it'll be better." It's like a little, he knows what elements will combine with this person's sense of faith in order for him to get his vision healed. I like the one where he asks the guy, he heals a lot of blind people, and he asks him, can you see? "Yeah, I see, but I can't tell the trees from the people. The people look like trees walking around." So Jesus kind of touches him and fine-tunes his vision. He goes, "What does it look like now?" "Oh, much better." You're kind of like your optometrist. In those kind of local religions that survive from the ancient world, there are those spiritual adepts, curanderos in Hispanic culture, brujos, that have connections with nature, and they can provide spiritual as well as physical remedies from the natural response. And you don't have to go through the power brokers of an organized religion. And there's something that Jesus retains a lot of vibrancy with that kind of image, cast in that kind of typification. That still, when you do a survey among neo-pagans, and that's Wicca and Druids, what is your understanding of Jesus? They think he was one of the most powerful sorcerer shamans ever. Now, I'm going to continue on with this. But I'm going to say that's not a bad thing. at all. That's not a bad thing, because because people don't have our complete understanding. They don't share our high level of appreciation for Jesus. I think it's really gratifying to find out that Jesus gets acceptance among people far quicker than doctrines and ecclesiastical authorities. And I'm going to talk about next week. I want to talk about the stage of global cultural development that makes the movements towards savior figures like Buddha and Jesus very approachable in an empire situation. You realize that something like Christianity and Buddhism, for a long time its closest competitor, now Islam, could only take place where you have a sense of a global culture. That you have to think in terms of no longer villages, no longer in terms of tribes, no longer in terms of empire, but you have to think of the network of global empires in order to have movements like you do in Buddhism and Christianity. So I hope I whetted your appetite at least to come back, and we got some more music to play, so we'll see you